It's sometimes funny to see the reactions of Brexiteers when they accuse the EU of mistreating the UK. How dare the EU mistreat the UK? We only wanted to leave and regain our sovereignty. How dare they impose these rules? But here's the thing: we made the case at the referendum numerous times that look, if we leave, then we're going to be a third country. This is how we are going to be treated. And what was even more hilarious was that many of these um, rules that were written about how sort of the EU treats third party countries, we were involved in. We helped to write. So we knew completely how we were going to be treated as like a third country. And yet, Brexiteers are mystified that we can't just, send stuff across to the EU as we used to do. This was all, magic. They can't understand the now mountains of paperwork that companies have to fill in to be able to sort of send stuff just across the channel, where previously they had to pretty much do filling like a sheet of paper as what it is they were sending, and you just whoop, straight across because everyone was following the same rules. And of course, you may have heard recently about the whole big honey fraud, or the big Brexit honey heist, as I suppose should probably start calling it. But what we can see here is that we have had people from other countries send honey to be processed in the UK to be sold on to the EU, which does not fit the definition of honey because it has been processed beyond the point where it ceases to be honey and is basically just a sugary syrup. And you wonder why the EU was so keen to enforce checks on us, because they knew that stuff like this would be happening. So before we go and sort of explain the UK's honey fraud and sort of the implications potentially down the line for this, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and a website, something called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And of course, as always, thank you very much to those people who do help and support the channel. There is also the YouTube thank you button, and of course, there's the Pony Club as well. And of course, remember, it was Wednesday yesterday, so there is a brand new sort of Pony Club video where I am sort of explaining and re-explaining my whole electoral calculus now for a potential general election, why I've sort of changed my mind, why I think there maybe still be a general election this year. But now, the downfall of Boris Johnson, we've had to sort of reevaluate, redo the math, as they say. So so make sure you get to watch that video if you are a member of the Pony Club, or you are on the Patreon as well. Like I say, you have access to all those videos. So let's crack on with this one then, shall we? So this comes from TRT World with the title of "The UK's Honey Fraud Explained." An EU probe has revealed that UK shoppers may be purchasing counterfeit honey labelled as authentic organic honey. And remember, this is a classic tactic of companies slapping organic in front of on their products just so they can sell it for a couple of probably like 100% increase in some cases, just because it has the word organic on it. They can just jack up the prices for it, and we have seen that many times. And sometimes when those products have been checked, they've actually been far from the organic honey claim. This is why one of the big EU rules and regulations was about these projects, of their authenticity. Are you actually saying what you claim to be? Do the Brexiteers care? No, because they really don't. Because as far as they're concerned, companies should be allowed to get away with this type of stuff. Hey, that's just capitalism, right? And if a consumer buys organic honey thinking it was organic honey when it doesn't turn out to be organic honey, well, that's not our problem. They should have done their homework, should have done their consumer, but people don't have time to do that detailed amount of research into these types of things. This is why these rules and regulations exist. But anyway, so the European Commission has uncovered the contamination of honey packaged in the United Kingdom with cheap sugar syrup. The action was taken by the Commission's Director General for Health and Food Safety, It involved a collaborative effort with 18 other EU countries and the Joint Research Centre, the EU's anti-fraud office as well. Out of 320 honey samples tested, 147 were found to be suspicious. 10 honeys sampled from the UK failed those tests. And although they may have been blended or even packaged in Britain, the honey was likely originated from overseas. As we said at the beginning, the honey comes in from overseas, then gets blended here to basically be a basically cheap sugar syrup, not the actual honey that it claims to be. This is, again, why it is so important to have rules and regulations around all this. No matter how many times we stress it, this is why these regulations this is why these types of regulations exist. So the honey, the report indicates that the honey imported from the UK had a suspicion rate of 100%. And with the JRC suggesting that the honey may have been produced in other countries before being processed in the UK, then re-exported to the EU. This is not the first time that these tests have indicated that the UK shoppers may be victims of honey fraud. In 2020, a leading German laboratory found that 8 out of 9 samples tested were non-compliant. However, supermarkets say that they do regularly test honey and audit supply lines. The UK government has said that it is investigating the results, but the officials suggest that there is no risk to the food safety. Yeah, and technically, you know, there is no risk to food safety, but the big thing is that this isn't a food safety issue, or at least from what we can tell at the moment, it's not a food safety issue. It's just a matter of fraud, because these honeys are being blended with so much sugar syrup that they basically cease to be honey at that point. But they are claiming that, yes, this is fully 100% organic honey. This is the problem. This is why regulations, this is why the authenticity things existed, with the Brexiteers complaining, oh, well, you can't have, Cornish pasties baked anywhere else, and they can't be called Cornish pasties unless they're made sort of in Cornwall, or, numerous other, food safety things that they complained about for years. But here you have an exact example of why you have this. And one of the big things we have to sort of certainly question, why hasn't this been caught out? Well, one of the things we always highlighted was, look, in a lot of these departments, they did not have to be as big as they needed to be because, well, they were part of the whole EU system. So, it was sort of, there was the UK government part, and then there was the rest of the sort of the EU, and all sort of working together to sort of, protect the single market. But now we're sort of out of that. These departments that are overseeing the regulations, overseeing the things like testing, have not been enlarged to the point that they need to be enlarged to, because the Brexiteers, and at least the Conservative government, have refused to increase the funding and the finance needed for these departments to run effectively. Now, I highly suspect in probably sooner or later, we will come across a massive fraud case. And I ultimately think that it is going to be down to the fact you had a department that was chronically underfunded and chronically understaffed, and it just did not see these coming. And I think that's what's eventually going to happen, that is going to sort of bring this issue to light ultimately. But anyway, like I say, we'll continue. Olaf said that such practices defraud consumers and put honey producers in jeopardy, as they face unfair competition from operators who can slash prices thanks to the illicit cheap ingredients. Again, why you have regulations, that you can protect things like that, so you can't just have companies just come along and do that. Again, why you have regulations. Lynn Ingram, the master beekeeper at Wesley Cottage Bees in Somerset, has joined a group of beekeepers calling for better information for shoppers. She suggested that shoppers should choose honey that states that the country of origin on the label, and ideally sourced from traditional local beekeepers. Aldo Coelho, the Mexico-based coordinator of the International Honey Authenticity Network, which has conducted tests on UK supermarket honey, including the adulteration, said that the UK food is flooded with very cheap adulterated honey imported from China, and that British authorities have been reluctant to even accept or address the problem. I wonder why. I wonder why. So the UK government disputes the claims that the honey imports are adulterated on an industrial scale, and has said that the enforcement is, quote, fit for purpose, and that there is insufficient evidence to date to include fraud. Oh. You've had 10 samples that clearly show 100% that they are suspicious. Gee, that person breaking into that house sure does look 100% suspicious. Maybe I shouldn't phone the police. After all, there's insufficient evidence that that person is clearly committing burglary. Oh, and unfortunately, I think this is going to be the first of many of these types of stories that we start to cover. But it is because the departments that cover these and this are just not being funded or staffed correctly. And this is something the UK government is desperately, sort of, I think, trying to hide the fact that we have, because we've left those big sort of EU institutions that we were part of, and they haven't increased these departments and these regulatory bodies to the size that they actually need to be. Because again, the Conservatives massively against regulation, and if you sort of want to be sort of, or at least put the appearance on that we are pro-regulation, well, then you just underfund the department, cut this manpower. Oh yeah, we're still following, industry rules and regulations, but the thing is, you don't have the police necessary to enforce those rules and regulations. That's how they're currently getting away with it. So the retailers and the honey industry have disputed the test results, and government officials have said that more advanced testing technology is required. A spokesperson for the Department of Food and Food and Environmental Affairs said that the UK government takes any type of food fraud seriously, and that they will examine the results of the new study to establish whether they are indicative of non-compliance. Ultimately, I think this is the first of many of these types of stories to come out. I really do think this is the first of many. It does not surprise me at all in the least that we are seeing this, because this fits with the whole Conservative mantra. Oh yeah, sure, we've kept all the regulations in place. Meanwhile, you've got essentially those bodies that are in charge of enforcing those rules and regulations inside those government departments that again aren't funded, are chronically understaffed, or have so much work that they can't get to these cases. And that's, I think, what we'll be seeing more of. And it won't take long, I think, before a major scandal breaks in and around this. I think that's what it will take, unfortunately. But that's, I think, where we are. And this is a massive fault of Brexit. The fact that, UK consumers are getting massively defrauded. And of course, you getting honey sent over across into the single market, masquerading as real or authentic honey. And this isn't, and the thing is, the EU can strike back and actually fine the UK for doing this, for not fulfilling their purpose, for not doing this. We've already been fined by the EU for this. So these fines will continue, and this should be something I think certainly Labour and the newspapers should be taking the government to task about, but they're not. And it's really worrying. And again, we still have very much a sort of pro-Brexit government, despite the fact that Rishi Sunak did the Windsor Framework. They are going to be very reluctant to sort of make sure that these government departments that oversee these rules and regulations are running efficiently, are up and running, because they really do not want that to happen. But as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, please remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button on your way out. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.